What is up, Internet Basketball Junkies? Coach Hack here. I'm joined by Coach Kramer. We're going to talk about some different ways to steal your team a bucket. Coach Kramer, thanks so much for coming on the stream today and talking hoops with me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Coach. This time of year, right? It's tournament time, and I mean, I think it's the case all year long. But like this time of year, being able to steal a bucket here and there is the difference between practicing on Monday or packing up the uniforms and going home. So it's a great topic and very timely. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah, we were talking before the stream started, and we were talking about the wide disparity in some of these scores of the first rounds of the playoffs. But as the playoffs go on, there's going to be a lot tighter games, and it's going to come down to being able to pick off a bucket here or there for your team. And we wanted to look at a few ways to do that. What do you think it actually means, Coach, to steal your team a bucket? What would you say?
I mean, I think a lot of it, Coach, I think it starts with preparation, right? You have to kind of to be preparing for these situations, I believe, all year long. I'm a big believer in starting with, the very first week, starting to install, late game situations, and not always on the offensive side because so many things, arise, but like especially on the offensive side and having things ready, when the moment calls for them late game. But then also, building an offensive package that has some counter actions in it, that you can set the defense up throughout a game to put them in positions where they get a little feisty, jump into a passing lane, and you end up maybe getting a backdoor layup out of it. I think those if you can get 3 or 4 of those, I was talking about, we call them our run it packages. It's basically the way that we call those out. We would say a play name, and then we would add the words "run it" to the end of it. We're looking when we do that to try to get a backdoor situation where we're going to get a cheap 2 points. So that on the offensive side, it's that, but it also can be things like stealing possessions defensively, with strategic trapping and things out of a timeout, out of different defenses. So I think that as we go through this, the people will see there's a variety of ways to steal possessions and steal baskets throughout. And, like you said, right, the disparity right now, especially here in the state of Ohio with the way the tournaments run nowadays, which is a topic for another time. I think it's badly damaged high school basketball in the state. The games will tighten up. And, so many times when 2 good teams get together, it really comes down to, which team can execute and steal those baskets at key moments. And a lot of times that's the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, when I think of a stolen bucket, I'm thinking of, something that's kind of brainstormed from the sideline that's pretty low effort for your players to execute, meaning you're putting them in position to not have to do very much work to be able to get free points. So it can be really hard to score baskets, especially like if you're in a grind it down half-court offense kind of a game. Transition, it gets a little bit easier to score buckets. But when you're thinking about putting your team in position to be able to score without a lot of effort, that's what I think of as a stolen bucket. And you mentioned something that I think is really important here. And you were talking about setting up these actions. We're going to look at a lot of different things here this morning. But I think the smartest coaches here understand how to use these actions, when to use these actions, and they've probably done something either on film or in the game that they're coaching that sets up whatever they're trying to do to steal a bucket. Yeah. Where if you've got a backdoor play and you've, you might run some counter action to it in the first quarter and in the second quarter, and then that the opponent is just kind of ripe to fall for the backdoor that you're setting up that you can pull off later in a game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking about hearing from you is with these opportunities to steal a bucket for your team, is it something that you might script out to start a game, or is it something that you're pretty much operating on feel and trying to set up throughout a game so that you have an option later in the game? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think that can work both ways. I'm a big believer in kind of feel. I always like to make the analogy because I'm a baseball fan too, and I always like to kind of make the analogy that's kind of like pitching, right? You set everything up with your fastball, and then your off-speed pitches, are the ones that sometimes you get them set up just right, and they're going to be perfect for the the big moment. I think it's mostly about just having really good play design and setting the play up and knowing just when to run it. I really feel like that's kind of it's more of an art, I think, Matt, than it is a science sometimes. I've had some teams that have struggled in rebuilding situations, and there have been times where I've actually kind of scripted out the first 10 possessions of a game the way I'd like them to look when the team makes us run offense from the top. Basketball, unlike football, it doesn't kind of play out like that all the time. But like sometimes if you have a team that really struggles to kind of give them an idea of what you want your first 10 possessions to look like and when you're going to hit this team with this backdoor or whatever the play is going to be, can be effective. But I think more times than not, it's a feel thing, and some of it's just trusting what you see as well, right? If you've got a team that starts to cheat your play, a lot of times the backdoor counters and these stealing buckets things happen are easiest to do against teams that are really well coached because they scout you up. And, they trust their scouting report, and you're using, really what they trust in their scouting report against them to beat them for a backdoor basket or a lob or whatever the case might be. So, I guess to answer your question, to boil it down, I think it's more about feel, and just kind of setting up your pitch, to go back to that analogy.
Yeah, I definitely like to operate off of feel. And I will see coaches on film where they might run kind of a gimmicky set to get an easy bucket, whether it's a zone set play or something like that, when they're up by like 20 points. And I would prefer not to do that. I would prefer to save something like that for a moment of need where I felt like we weren't just kind of practicing the set. I think there's a trade-off when you're in good leagues with good coaches that devour film and know what you're trying to do, that you want to try to kind of keep some of this stuff off of film so that you're not in a position where a team, you're trying to pull it out at a time that you need it and the other team's on to you because you've used it too much or you used it at a time that you didn't need it. So
absolutely.
What do you think is the realistic amount of points that you could steal your team in a game? I put in the title of this video, I put 6 to 10 points.
Yeah.
There's a ton of games that are decided by 6 or 10 points. How many do you think that realistically from the sideline through play calling and manipulating the defense for some of these gimmicky, cheaper buckets, do you think that you can get in a game?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I always said that the goal was going to be 8, right? And that is between your 6 to 10. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't like to get 12. And it doesn't mean that we would be disappointed if we only got 4, because a lot of times if you're playing another good team, 4 is the difference between winning and losing, right? I look back to my days in Northeast Ohio at Fairless. I coached in a league with some really well-coached teams, and you hit the nail on the head. And we've talked about Northeast Ohio coaches before. It's a solid group. In that league, there was Gene Schindewolf, who had won 500 games at Manchester, and Keith Snoddy, who took Triway to 2 straight state championships at Triway, and a guy named Steve Frank that a lot of people don't talk about down at Tusky Valley, who won a district championship, and Jay Peters at CVCA. I mean, you weren't gonna get them for 20. 25. You weren't gonna outcoach them necessarily. So it wasn't about trying to outcoach the other guy. It was just about knowing what they like to do defensively, knowing what their tendencies were, and kind of having that feel for, okay, here's a moment, right, where I think that what I just saw tells me that this run at action will get us a layup, and then making sure obviously that your team is prepared and coached up well enough to execute it well. And then I always joke around about this because at Fairless early on, especially in our rebuild, we'd run the play, execute it perfectly, and then miss the layup. So I always kid with coaches, when you're going to go through something like that, make sure you remind them to make the layup at the end, because a well-executed play with no basket doesn't do you very good. But like we got to be pretty good at that stuff. It was about 8 a game, and we would chart that stuff. We would say, all right, our average is at 6.8 stolen points per game, and again, you look over the course of a career when you're playing in a competitive league and you're playing a competitive schedule. How many times 6.8 points changes the outcome of a game? Yeah. Right. I mean, it's a ton. It's a ton. And so it's preparation that's definitely worth pouring yourself into over the course of a season.
Yeah, that's one of the fun parts of this element that we're talking about here today specifically, is that you mentioned a lot of good coaches, and they're trying to do the same thing as you. They're trying to steal buckets as just like you are. So even if you can get your team 8 points or 10 points on a lob play, a baseline out of bounds play, a backdoor play, a jump ball play, you might be playing against somebody that you're trying to stop from stealing buckets from you, and they might have gotten 4 or 6 themselves, and you're only +4 on the stolen bucket count. So that's kind of the fun part about competing against another good coach. When you are a heavy favorite and your team is a lot better than the team that you're playing against, you really don't need to steal points. You'll find plenty of ways to score without it. But these tight games where it's kind of an even skill match or an even coaching match, or even something where you're a little bit of an underdog where you can kind of keep your team in the game by stealing a bucket here and there, I think that's where the fun part of this really comes in. So, Coach, the first clip that I wanted to show here is a panic backdoor. So we're going to look at a few different kind of backdoors in this conversation here today, but the panic backdoor is interesting because it's usually used specifically for late game. And what we're going to see here is we're going to set up like we're in a broken play. So we're seeing Wake Forest operate on offense here, and they are intentionally looking like they're trying to run a play and that it's a broken play. And everyone's kind of trying to break to get open to save the ball handler. But really what they're doing is they're opening up this baseline with designed movement, and then they're baiting a single defender into a backdoor with that baseline cleared. So typically, this isn't something that you run first play of the game. This is something that you're kind of running in the chaos of the end of the game. And it's when you really, really need one, you would go to something like this. Coach, what's your experience with this kind of panic backdoor concept where you're making it look like a broken play, but you're actually setting up your backdoor?
Yeah, man, I'm not that smart. I like that. We always talk, Coach, at the end. I always say, man, again, I call myself semi-retired, right? And I think it may be a psychological thing with me because I don't like the idea of being old. But like if I were going back to coach, I'd do something like this. I think it's genius, right? I mean, the defense feels like it's getting over on you, and really what you're doing is you're wanting them to think that way, and you're setting them up for that sucker backdoor play, and that's a stolen bucket. I think that's outstanding design by the Wake Forest coach there. I think you touched on a couple other things that were interesting. When you're up 20, and I think young coaches, are more susceptible to this. You want to show your whole bag. You got a good team. Don't run these things when you're up by 20. Why would you put this on film? I think that's a really good point. You want to show your whole bag. Your team's up by 20 points. Just let them play. Is when you get older and after you've won some games, you realize that, a night where you don't have to make any play calls because you're just better than the other team is one less thing for people to see on film. And I would never show this on film in a game where I knew that, that we were probably overwhelming favorites. And certainly not up by 10 or 15 points late in the game, but that's great stuff.
Yeah, so I post a clip pretty frequently of Belmont. They used this panic backdoor set to beat UCLA in a game. This was probably 5 years ago or maybe even longer. But then I saw more recently, a high school coach, I believe in Ohio, use something like this to win their team a game. Yeah. So I had reposted that on X, and it got shared around pretty good. But this is more to prove that these aren't just things that college Division I teams can do. These are definitely things that you can do with your high school team. There's no doubt about it. But I'll pull that clip up now, Coach. This is high school in Ohio that was using this panic backdoor set, and they won themselves a game with this action. So we've got it tied. Marion local, Spencerville, 56-56. They're faking like they're in trouble, and they set it up just perfectly.
I mean, listen, you hit the nail on the head. If you're a high school coach and you're not doing some of this, you're missing an opportunity to, to really impact your team in game. I think, in the last 15 years of my career, we had a package of at least 5 of these that we could run at any moment, and they weren't panic. So I really like the panic idea. They were counters to set plays that we knew the other team would have scouted that baited them into that same kind of thing. And if you're a high school coach, as an offensive tactician, if you're not doing it, your next step, in my opinion, would be to add some things like this to your package. It just gives you some real power to impact the outcome of a game. And you don't, as a head coach, you don't have that much, right? But like that's one way where once the game starts, that's one way where you still do have an opportunity to impact the outcome of a game. So I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah, I feel like in a high school coach, you're certainly managing a game, but most of the work that you do that decides the outcome of games is done before the game is played. It's the practice and the preparation and things of that nature. What I always appreciated about how you structured things are you always had your base plays, and then all your base plays always had counters. So you kind of had this built-in option to steal a bucket, and you were always kind of setting up those actions. And it's really about how you organized your playbook as opposed to putting some neat playbook together that had some bells and whistles, because everything kind of worked together and worked against each other in a sense, where you were always kind of setting up a backdoor play just by running your base action.
Yeah, I mean that you hit the nail on the head. We're big believers in this. I actually had a player reach out to me the other night that was watching one of our former live feeds that you'd posted to social media somewhere, and he said, "Man," I wasn't even looking. I heard that voice, and I knew it was your voice, Coach Kramer." And we started talking back and forth. And he said he's coaching, an AAU team with his young kid, and he's like, "I still use your backdoor runnets." I thought that was a great concept when we played. We always knew that when you called one of those that we were about to shoot a layup. And so much of it, you hit the nail on the head too, with the preparation is in practice, right? I mean, if you don't prepare these things well in practice, because they do take some timing, and some of the passes can be tricky angles, and you have to really teach your players to trust that when that guy cuts back door, he doesn't have to be open by 10 feet. We always said if you can see him get his head and shoulders past the defender, throw it out there in front of him. He's got the advantage, and we're going to score. And so it takes a lot of preparation before the game starts. But to hear a kid that I coached, Curtis Cool, his senior year was the year before we made the run in districts back in 2006. That was 20 years ago. Talking about that kind of thing. It just kind of makes you smile as a coach, and it makes you feel like maybe all the things you did wrong, maybe you had something right, as we know in coaching.
Yeah, it is fun to kind of watch your coaching tree make their own way, and they always seem to have their own ideas about how they want to coach the game of basketball, which is certainly fine and appropriate. But then you always get to see just a little bit of your influence weaved in there, whether it's a play or verbiage or whatever it is. That's what we do in coaching. We work with other coaches, we copy other coaches, we steal little bits and pieces, and we're all kind of a collection of the people that we've studied, and a little bit of ourselves in there as well. But before we move on, I just wanted to mention, you had written this guide about set play families, and that's kind of what we were discussing. Sure. And you lay out your framework for how you build your playbook in there. I would highly recommend coaches go check this out, because it's very interesting and it's very powerful when you structure things like this. But basically, you have base actions that you're working out of your playbook, and each base action has a again call, which is the counter. So basically your base action sets up your counter, and then it also has a run it call, which would be a backdoor out of the same kind of movement pattern or action. So every base play is backed up by a counter and backed up by a backdoor counter. But that's in that set play families guide that you put out there, Coach. I'll try to link it in the description, because I think coaches would be interested in that. But I loved how you framed that up. I think that's such a great way to just maximize your playbook, in terms of you're not necessarily teaching your teams completely different things, but you have a counter option and a backdoor option for the things that you run. Yeah,
it's, again, you talk about maximizing your playbook. and you give yourself a chance to impact a game from the sideline in any small way by having those kind of counters set up. And it just, over the years, it really served us well. And the way that we make the call would be like, let's just say that we were running, we name our things. Over the years, I've named my plays different things, but let's just say that we were running chest, right? So the base call would be chest, and then literally the second option or the counterplay to chest would be chest again. It's obviously it's a subtle word, and it's going to make the defense, if it's well prepared, especially if they're into your playbook and they think they've got your calls, it's going to make the defense think they're getting chest again, right? But they're not getting the same play. They're getting a counter play off of that. And then, chest and run it would be another counter play off of that as well. So they're just hearing the play call, and on their scout, it says they're running chest, but they really just got three different things. And a lot of times what happens is that run it play, if you save it for just the right moment, it's the back door. You get a guy jumping into a passing lane because he thinks he knows the scouting report at a key moment, and you just walked yourself right into a layup. So, again, it's setting up your curveball with your fastball, and it's served us really well. And, again, like I said before, I coached against a lot of really good coaches when I was at Fairless here in Northeast Ohio. And I always think about going over to Triway and, how that place was crazy over there in the pit. That gym was just one of the greatest gyms of all time. That home team feeds off that emotion. So you were talking about a feel and a win. Sometimes the best time to hit a team with a backdoor in the flow of a game is when they're in the midst of a little run and the fans are going crazy and the opponent's feeding off that, that crazy energy, and they're really up in passing lanes and intense and, really going to land the knockout blow. And now you hit them with a run out with a run it set, you hit the back door, you get the layup. Sometimes you get the layup and a foul, and you can kind of squash that, that momentum for a minute. And it's just really powerful stuff. It really is. And that document, as you said, it talks about how to set that up, and it's got several plays in there. But like one of the things I always say when I write to coaches, take the plays that I give you, but like be a tactician with your own plays, right? You've already got plays in your playbook. Look at what that item offers you, and then look at what you're already doing, and ask yourself, all right, here's an action we run. Is there a way to run it? And again, is there a counter that I can add to that? Is there a run it opportunity here? And more times than not, there is with just about any action that you're running. So it doesn't just give the things that we did at Fairless. It also, encourages coaches to be more tactical with their own stuff, to not be afraid, to make their own play designs, and maybe come up with something great that nobody's ever seen before.
Yeah, and not to belabor the point, but the genius part of it is the verbiage, the verbal call, where you're from the sideline, you're saying chest, run it, and it just sounds like you're telling your team to run chest, but you're actually telling them to run the backdoor counter to chest there. But we'll move on. Let's look at a slip screen option here. We've got Richard Pitino from when he was at New Mexico. And he's going to work a ball screen slip. So slips work great on ball or off the ball. And why this becomes kind of a bucket that you can steal as a coach is you can really pick up on coverages for how teams are playing screens.
Yep.
And that's going to give you an indication that this kind of slip action is going to work. So with a ball screen, anytime that a team is switching, it's a great to call these slip options to try to steal one. But there's also these opportunities where you're playing against a team that covers ball screens above the line of the ball. So when you're talking about hard hedging or trapping ball screens, that really gives you opportunities to slip out. So this is a nice action from Coach Pitino here. It looks like there's multiple options to work this slip. But I think at the right time for an on ball or an off ball, you can really create an opportunity for your team to get a layup without having to do much work other than orchestrate this kind of timing to manipulate a coverage that is coming based on your scouting report or what they've shown you previously in the game, Coach.
Yeah, I think Coach Pitino, young obviously and old, are both really, really good. I watch stuff like this, and obviously one of the keys to this is the spacing, right? The spacing is pretty high there around the floor, just about everywhere.
Yep.
I think that's key. And I think, obviously over the years, the 3-point line has become such a weapon in basketball that that there's more space, to operate in the paint than there ever has been before, because defenses, they're not going to sag off nearly as much in a college game as some teams still do in high school games. So, this was set up beautifully. I mean, he knew the coverage he was going to get. And when you look at all that space there, you can see when that slip happens, there's really nobody to stop that. And I said it again. I'll say it again. I said it last time we talked. I don't know how anybody ever gets stopped anymore. It really, it's tough. I mean, there's so much good stuff going on out there, and it's all very conceptual. You don't see a lot of the regimented offenses that you used to see. Some, but it's that's a stolen bucket. That's a basket that the defense is watching that ball get laid in the basket. The other coach is sitting there going, "We just gave one up," and you kind of feel like the cat that ate the canary there. That's what you practiced for.
Yeah, with slips and backdoors, there's definitely a spacing element that you need to control. You want to empty the baseline, or you want to empty a side of the court.
Yep.
That's going to really give you the room to execute these. This is
Yep.
a lot, the backdoors and the slips are a lot tougher if you have somebody just sitting on the low block there. With modern spacing, where there's a lot of Princeton, there's a lot of 5 out, that opens up so many more opportunities to get those back cuts and slips and backdoors to steal your team a bucket. There's just a lot more space to work with, and a lot more space for the defense to have to account for with a lot of the 3-point shooting and the probably the more range that players have these days. Any final thoughts on this slip action before we move on, Coach?
I mean, the thing I like best about it is it just came so naturally. There was no slowdown into like a call. And I mean, it really, the defense didn't have any way to see it coming. Again, like you were talking about with the backdoor cuts, and anytime you can steal one, it's a good thing. 3-pointers and layups, that's what's winning games nowadays, and free throws, right?
Right. All right, Coach, I'm going to mix it up here a little bit. And what I'm trying to get on my screen is a jump ball set play. Have you used any set plays off the jump ball to try to steal one right off the bat of a game?
I would be honest with you, at times, but man, we were so small throughout most of my career. We were almost forfeiting the jump ball. You know what I mean? I had big guys in Georgia, and when I first walked in, and I was used to being one of the bigger guys in the huddle, and I felt like a midget for the 4 years that I coached down there, because I had a 6'10" and 6'9", and we did some things. My thing with this, and call me wrong or whatever, and maybe I am, but like in high school ball with the alternating possession, you only get the one jump ball and maybe one in overtime. And, maybe I'm being lazy. We didn't put as much into that as I did other things. And that, maybe I needed to, I don't know, but like, I wasn't big on the jump ball. I just wasn't. So like, anytime I see something, I look and think, all right, if I had a big guy that could win the tip, we'd do that. But like at Fairless, and I think back to our district championship game, we played Triway. Triway had a 7-footer named Sebastian Weber. And our biggest guy in the starting lineup was 6'2". So we put Jordan Jennings, who was 5'8", in the jump ball circle to jump against him, just to kind of play with their minds a little bit. Like, are you guys serious? And we were. It didn't matter which guy put there. We weren't winning the jump ball. So, our strategy was more playful with that group when it came to the jump ball. We just didn't want to give up a layup ourselves. So we were more thinking about what they might do and just getting back to defend our basket.
Yeah, I do think jump ball set plays they're on the fun side. It's certainly not the first thing you're going to install with your team. It's kind of a frosting on the cake, more or less. And it's one of those things where if you're successful with it, coaches will pick up on in their scouting. They'll see that you just stole your team a bucket. Everybody's usually watching the jump ball. So if you have some kind of idea like this that works well, a lot of coaches will pick up on it and then try to take it away. But what we're looking at here is a simple option where you're looking to just tip the ball forward. And then you're on the right. I guess I'm looking on the right side, Coach, where you could basically just tip the ball forward and try to work into a fast break. And then on the left side, you'd be looking to tip it back and then kind of run a sideline action where you're back screening for the player that executed the jump ball. Yeah. So what coaches have done really sneakily is they set these screens where it's hard for people to pick up. It just looks like they're kind of running into bodies. It's not like a standard screen that's a dead giveaway, and all of a sudden there's a free player running to the rim. College coaches will run this, and they will, this can be a lob play to start the game. You tip it backwards, you advance it sideline, you throw the ball up to the rim, and all of a sudden that big center that was just jumping for the jump balls coming out of the rafters to dunk a ball home. I remember Todd Golden at Florida executing this to perfection, this kind of back screen lob right off the tip.
Yeah.
But I think there's different things that you can do, ranging from more complex with a back screen and some timing for a lob to just something where you're trying to tip it to a certain direction on the court and then play a fast break from there.
I think where this would be really useful, as you kind of break things down, is in an overtime situation where there's a little bit greater sense of urgency, maybe to grab that jump ball. I mean, I can see some real value, all seriousness, beside the fact that we were tiny at Fairless. If you've got a guy that can win the tip, I would be maybe saving something like that for that scenario, because the opening tip, there's going to be some change of possessions. If there's no tie-ups, you're at least going to get the ball at the end of the quarters. In an overtime, that's an extra possession, right? And again, if you can steal a bucket there to start an overtime, you just spotted yourself 2 points. I think that could be very valuable. So, again, semi-retired, that might be, something that I would add to my late game package, my late game situational package for an overtime situation.
Yeah, I guess in my coaching career, I played jump balls pretty conservatively, where we just kind of protected our basket and tried to tip the ball backwards. I'm kind of like you in the sense that my early teams were all midgets, and we didn't win a ton of jump balls. And then I got all the big guys later in my coaching career. But by that point, I was kind of pretty established in how I did things, where I was just kind of sticking with that conservative format. Let's get the ball and run our first opening play. And let's make sure our basket is protected. I also feel like I didn't get burned very much in my coaching career, trying to do too much on the jump ball, being aggressive, where we just got our guys back and nobody was really able to run anything off of the tip to score points against us. But, Coach, we're going to transition into another backdoor set, and this one's a little bit different here. We've got Coach Tom Izzo, who's been running this. Bill Self has been running this for years and years, and this is really a counter to pressure. So when you're seeing a team that's trying to take you out of your offense, where they're heavy in those passing lanes, this is an action that Coach Izzo and Coach Self have been running for so long. But basically, you're running this kind of built-in blind pig action, where you're going to hit the high post. You're going to have some timing here where your wing is cutting to the wing, and it's just a perfect opportunity to go backdoor right on the catch there. And what I like most about this action that I see from Coach Izzo and Coach Self commonly is that it flows into something else pretty naturally. Like, this isn't the play. This is like the first option if you're seeing a pressure team. But then if the backdoor is not there, they're not throwing it, and they're just kind of segueing into the next action in their playbook. Coach, any thoughts on this kind of blind pig backdoor to counter pressure defense?
Yeah, in my packages, that's our chest run it. It's also our up run it. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We got a ton of mileage out of that. I mean, just a ton of mileage out of that against teams that wanted to deny that wing entry pass, right? And if a team is stubborn and they want to keep trying that, you might pick up 16 points on that in a high school game. If it's a team that just hell bent on continuing to do it. I think the second thing you hit on there that I'm a big believer in is making sure that the players know that is the first option, and we expect to hit it when we run this play. But if it's not open, we're not going to just throw it out of bounds or throw it to the other team or eat it and reset. There's going to be a second flow to that, where we're going to continue to put relentless pressure on the defense, because one of the things that's about this, if the defense does take that away, it's compromised somewhere else, right? I mean, somewhere else there's something good on the floor. So the last thing you want to do is say, oh, well, we didn't get that, let's reset, right? Let's keep attacking from that spot right there. And I know with our package, we go into a handoff situation there, where there's some two-man action on this empty side of the floor now with the guy that caught the elbow pass. And then there's we kind of perpetuate the play and continue with it on the backside as well. So you get great play design, get you this layup, right? But like outstanding play design allows you to continue to attack and get something good out of this when you don't hit the backdoor layup.
Yeah, and I think with when you're talking about attacking pressure defense, there's kind of a game within a game going on where one side is winning and one side is losing when someone's trying to pressure you. The defense is winning if they're taking you out of your offense and you can't execute your stuff. The defense is winning if they're taking the ball off you and going and laying it in for 2 points. But you can really back off the defense when you hit something like this, where they're just like on guard, like, okay, we kind of can't be this aggressive in the passing lanes anymore because we know we're going to have to pay for it. So that's one of the things with pressure is, and this applies to press, this applies to denying passes, and things like that, where it's like, how bad do you really want to press? How bad do you really want to pressure?
Yeah.
If you're getting burned for 2 points like this, that kind of just backs everything off, where the other team just knows that they really can't sell out to the passing lanes or sell out up the court because you're prepared to counter it.
Let me speak to that for a second. I think that's a great point, right? So we're talking about stealing possessions when you're competitive and trying to win games. But my Rebuild 101 course that I'm about to come out with, in one of the lessons, it talks about the X's and O's that can impact your ability to be competitive in games quicker than anything else. And two of them, you hit on one, was press offense, because when you're the underdog and you're rebuilding and people see you as weak, teams that don't press are going to come after you and try to land the knockout punch early. So if you don't have good press offense, you're down 16-2 to start the game. It doesn't really matter what you can do in half court. So press offense would be number one. The other way that you can help your team most when it's still kind of susceptible to being bullied by a pressuring defense is these backdoor plays, right? You hit the nail on the head. If you don't have anything to back the defense off, and the defense knows that you're going to do what you do, and they can just keep coming at you relentlessly, they're never ever going to let you breathe and run your offense. But like hitting one or two of those early in a game can really help a young team get their treading. And then the defense got in the back of their mind, say, listen, coach is yelling at me because I just gave up a backdoor. I don't care how much they talk about pressure defense. Kid gets beat once, gets beat twice. Everybody kind of says, all right, we got to be careful here. And now you're more able to get into the things that you like to practice in half court and actually be able to run them. And so I think that those are some good points that could be made here as well.
All right, Coach, I'd like to move on and look at a different concept here, and this is a keeper concept. And what I've been noticing is that in college basketball and professional basketball, there's a lot of emphasis going to this handoff game. I noticed it maybe 10 years ago when coaches really started to use zoom action more often. But the handoff game is kind of coming into the high school basketball game, modeled off the college and pro game. And when you have the handoff game, you've got to have these options where you don't hand it off, you keep it, and you take it in for a layup.
Sure.
So when I think about this keeper option, I think the main example that I can give is, Draymond Green with the Warriors, where they're using him to set a lot of exit screens. They're using him in a lot of handoff games. And most of the time, he would just be getting the ball to Klay Thompson and to Steph Curry so that they can shoot from the outside. But maybe once a game or once every other game, he's going to fake that pitch and he's going to take it to the rim. And even a guy that's as kind of inept as a scorer as Draymond is. Draymond's a great player, but he's not a scorer. He's getting these kind of breakaway, wide open layups, just playing off of faking the handoff. And if you don't do it very often, if you're sparing with how you use it, I think a keeper option can be a great way to steal your team a bucket or two every now and then.
Absolutely. And in my last item that we released, Coach, our top action was a handoff at that elbow area. And one of the last things that I talked about in that package was the fact that, teams are going to start to get antsy on that handoff. And when the guy who's got the ball, when his defender, starts to cheat in the direction of the handoff, a simple fake handoff and turn and go to the basket turns into a wide open layup. And that's a stolen basket, and it's not a call that you make. right? Now, obviously, with a high school kid, if you're in a timeout and you're coming out with that play and say, hey, we've run top a couple times, and my high post guy is, Brian Cross. Hey, Brian, you know what I mean? You've been running that handoff. Your guy's jumping, out and hedging that hard on the handoff. Fake the handoff this time and turn and see what's going on, right? You can kind of put it in your own offensive player's head that maybe you haven't used that option yet, because sometimes with high school players, they get kind of, robotic and regimented in what they're doing. That's a great way to steal a basket, and then once they learn how to do it, they can start to manipulate that handoff a little bit better. And so, they're doing it in the natural flow of the game, right within the concept that you're running. So I really like that. And I think Draymond Green was a great example, but like this stuff works in high school ball too. It's very effective in high school ball.
Yeah. So I think with high school basketball, when handoffs come into your package, it's a really natural counter to be able to have a keeper option that your players could use as a read, or they could use as a call, where you could have it as like a counter out of a play where you have a handoff where you're trying to dictate that they sell this action but keep it, or you can just have it be a more conceptual piece of your game plan, where your players always have the opportunity to keep it if they see the defense cheating there. But what I see the trend is with college basketball like crazy is coaches are getting so good at using masking actions, where basically they have some kind of flow and movement early into a possession. A lot of coaches are using a stagger, where they run a player off a stagger into a touch action, where player runs off a stagger, you pass it to that player, and then the player that passed it to him is going to come either take a handoff back from him, or it can be a keeper action. So I think this fits perfectly into this kind of idea where you're trying to mask your offense so that the defense really doesn't know what you're running until you divert in some way, shape, or form from your masking action. But by that time, it's too late for the coaches on the bench or the players to realize what you're running, because everything kind of evolves so quickly. So, basketball 20 years ago, you walk the ball up the court, you get into your 1-4 high alignment, and then I know as a coach, okay, they run these three things out of their 1-4 high alignment. With these masking actions, the flow and the speed, it's making it really hard for coaches to be able to help their teams understand what's coming at them based on the formations or the movement patterns of the offense. Any final thoughts on this keeper action before we move on to the next one, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's great stuff. And again, it doesn't have to come with a call. It's very conceptual, and it's reading, it's playing basketball. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's very, very hard to scout it. You're using the term masking. I really like that. I always called it false action back in the day. I like the word masking better. I like the word masking better. I've taken to using that word. I think it's great stuff. And again, that staggered into that touch pass back is something you're seeing in just about every college game, right? And one of the things that's really changed over the years, and we really tried at the high school level when we were really coming into our own. And I always talk about the Fairless program because it's kind of the pride and joy of my career. Because of how hard it was to get that program to that level. We really made a commitment to trying to do those kind of things back in 2006, 2007, because I had some really smart players that had been together for a number of years and experience, and it made us really hard to guard, and then you give kids options to fake handoffs and, all the other things that we're talking about. And at the high school level, it makes you really, really good, and one of the things that you notice if you go back, and even in the NBA, if you look at a film from like the 90s, which was a really good era of NBA basketball, the speed at which these guys now are running their offense, the pace, even in half court, that these offensive actions are being run. You used to be able to see there's one, then there's the second, then there's the third move, and really nowadays it all happens at once. And it just makes defense really, really hard. So these are all things that I think are great things for coaches to look at and consider.
All right, Coach, to move on, we're going to look at some free throw plays. And this is out of my guide on special teams.
Yeah.
And these are three different options that coaches could use. The most common one is the one on the far left, which I would call cross pick, which basically you're working your two players that are in rebounding position to work with one another, where one of them is going to come off across the lane and try to basically screen or rub off on for their teammate who's also going to cross the lane, and can find some really big pockets of space to get offensive rebounds here. What's your experience in using any of these tactics to try to steal a free one off of a free throw rebounding situation, Coach?
Yeah, we used them. We definitely used them. We had a couple of them. There was that one that we used, and we used one where the guy on the second level, when we were shooting a free throw, would screen the defender up, and we would try to bring the top guy on the lane line around to the backside. A great coach that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, in Northeast Ohio lore, Henry Cobb. When I coached with him as an assistant at Canton South, there was one year where every time we shot a free throw, he had an even or an odd call on, and even was one of those games, and odd call was the other one of those games. So we weren't a great free throw shooting team that year, and he wanted to give us every opportunity to steal possessions. And Henry, for my money, is one of the best that's ever done it. And this was a big part, not a big part, but it was a part of what we did to try to steal possessions within a game. And I thought it was a genius idea. It was a real simple call. We'd be shooting foul shots, and he'd just shout out odd, or he'd shout out even, and the kids would know which one of those games that we were playing. And we stole some possessions over the course of a year. And again, you talked at the beginning, stealing possessions is anytime you can do it, you've given your team one more chance to score, and one more chance to put themselves in a position to win. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, missed free throws would absolutely drive my father crazy. My dad cannot process why high school kids can't just make 80% of their free throws. And I try to tell him that's, unrealistic. Kids don't make 80% of their free throws very often. He thinks that because he's 70 some years old and can probably make 80% of his free throws still, that kids should be able to make their free throws.
Right.
But that's really not realistic. There is some really bad free throw shooting teams. And if your best player that is most aggressive on offense is getting fouled a lot, there's going to be a lot of missed free throws. So my point of saying that is this can be a strategy that you deploy and emphasize based on your team's ability to make free throws. If your team free throw percentage is bad and you don't have a high quality free throw percentage shooters stepping up there commonly, you might want to put more of an emphasis into these concepts. So just to kind of finish going through what we're looking at here, the first is this cross pick. A lot of teams do this. This is really fun to watch on film. You really don't notice it happen until somebody points it out to you, and then you never not notice it. And this over-under dive is we're just kind of sequencing the movement pattern where we're going to try to work in a certain kind of a different pattern. But just to make sure that we maximize our ability to put people in position to grab rebounds. And then this last one is a need a miss strategy. So if you were in this position where you were down 2 and you were shooting your last free throw with a few seconds left, where you needed an intentional miss to try to tip the ball back out or offensive rebound to get a shot, you would run something like this need a miss strategy, where you're telling your player to try to miss it to the left. You're flooding all your bodies over to the left, and then also you have a shooter kind of rotating where you could grab that ball and throw it right out to him. So this is kind of a strategy that I think you can emphasize more if your team is going to need it, but also this kind of cross-pick strategy. A lot of teams just do that as their base kind of thing on how they operate on free throws. You probably didn't watch the Cavs last night because
I did.
Mitchell and Harden weren't playing, so I'm a true fan. I watch them no matter what the situation looks like.
I watched them.
They kind of come and go depending on how they're doing or who's playing in the game. But if you watched that game last night, you noticed Jalen Tyson stole 2 different possessions throughout the course of the game on free throw rebounding, where he kind of wedged a guy under the rim, stole that rebounding position, and then went and got a possession for us. I guess while I'm setting up the next piece of media here, Coach, I'd like to hear your take on that game against the Pistons last night. The Cavs lost by 1 in overtime in a thrilling game, but it wasn't the kind of outcome I think you and I were hoping for. What were your thoughts on that game last night, Coach?
Well, I mean, first of all, if I was Detroit, I'd be extremely concerned that that's my second round playoff opponent, and they had 60 points sitting on the bench. and it took some really creative officiating. And when one of the I don't want to use the word dumb, but one of the most ridiculous fouls on a 3-point shooter that I've ever seen to get the game into overtime.
You think that was bad officiating or a bad play by Tyson? So what
I
happened?
thought it was that was a bad play by Tyson. I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but I mean, there was some things that went on in that game. The overturned foul on Porter. Yeah, I mean, he got fouled. I mean, I don't care where the ball, it's a foul, right? You called it on the floor. It's supposed to be, irrefutable video evidence to overturn it. And he got smacked on the wrist and he got his shirt grabbed. I don't understand how that. We can get into the NBA officiating and go all night. The Cavs did everything wrong. In the last minute, they turned the ball over for a pick six. I thought Dennis Schrader, for as well as he played a lot of that game, was sloppy with the ball in really key spots, like just really sloppy with it. But that Cavs team right now, I really like. I mean, earlier in the year, I'm a born and bred Cavs fan too, and I'll watch them any night. But early in the year, I was frustrated with that team because I felt like they were going through the motions, and I thought it was a team that just looked like they had realized that they'd hit their ceiling and they weren't going anywhere. I mean, I think that the trades that they made injected, even before Harden, some life into that team that made them really believe they've got a chance. And Tyson is a big reason why they were able to make those trades. He became a better version of DeAndre Hunter than DeAndre Hunter. Yeah. And what he did last night for most of the game was fantastic, including stealing those rebound off the missed free throws. The foul was bad. The outcome of the game to me last night was almost inconsequential. I mean, Detroit won. We sat down 2 future Hall of Famers and they had their whole roster. So like I said, that's as close to a win as a loss can ever be in the NBA. And honestly, you can tell me if I'm wrong with this. I don't think the Cavs want to move up into the 2 or 3. I think they want to sit at 4. I think they want Detroit in the second round. I think they want to try to avoid Boston because Boston's been a pain in their side for as long as possible, and maybe even see if New York can knock them off. So to me, last night Cleveland got what they wanted there. I think, and if I was JB Bickerstaff, I wouldn't be sleeping very well after what I saw there. Again, in today's NBA, seeding is, and the Cavs learned that the hard way last year. What happens in the regular season is not a great predictor for every team when it comes to when those playoffs started. It's just not the same game. So that being said, it was also good to see some mixing it up. We got some guys that'll put their nose in there and push and shove and get a little nasty. I think this team lacked that. Schrader will do it. I think the other one that does it is Tyson. And the kid that didn't play last night, Keon, he'll do it too. I think it's an interesting team, man. I mean, I'm really excited about where the Cavs are going. After last night, I was even more excited, honestly, because I think. And how about Sam Merrill? Guys, there's a guy that nobody talks about enough. That dude, he's a bucket, man, and he's doing some things. The Cavs are pretty good. I mean, they're pretty good. They got a shot. I really believe they have a shot. And you haven't heard me say that all year, so. There's my take on last night.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Tyson. I think the Cavs are really deep, and I don't like how that's affected Tyson, where he's kind of gotten moved out of the core of the team, it kind of feels like, because I felt like he's been their second best player next to Mitchell for the entirety of the season. His minutes have gone down since they've brought these other guys in. But with Mitchell and Harden out yesterday, Tyson got to play a ton, and he was right in Cade Cunningham's face. He took on that challenge. He was guarding him full court. I was really impressed with Tyson. The play that you were talking about, which was kind of decided the game. I mean, the Cavs were up 9 with 2 minutes to go. They should win the game.
And they couldn't make a foul shot either. That was part of it.
So what happened was, they missed Porter missed a free throw to leave the Cavs up 3. And the Pistons were bringing the ball down, and the Cavs were trying to foul to stop the clock, make them shoot free throws, that kind of deal. And when the ball handler saw them trying to foul, he went to shoot a half-court shot. And the officials gave him 3 free throws, which they should have because he was getting into his shooting motion.
Sure, he was.
Before the foul. So it was kind of a stupid play on Tyson's part to just be so blatant with taking the foul. You want to take fouls when players are facing away from the basket. But what the interesting thing to me was Atkinson had made 2 challenges already, and he had won both. And then after he had won both of his challenges, he had no challenges remaining. There was like 3 plays that were like blatant calls that needed overturned that he couldn't challenge. So like you shouldn't have to challenge 2 plays because the officials made the wrong call, win the challenges, and then not be able to challenge 3 pretty obvious things later on. I mean, they called
it makes no sense.
Yeah, they fouled out Allen on a very clean block, which not only gave the Pistons free throws when the Cavs should have had the ball, but it also took away our best interior player, Allen, who's having a magnificent game. Coach, we got to get back into stealing buckets. Do you have any final thoughts on the Cavs for our next?
I mean, I think you hit the nail. That was the play I was talking about with the creative officiating. I mean, when Allen went out of that game, we still should have won it. But when it went to overtime and there was no Allen, we didn't really have much of a chance, honestly. Right? I mean, I thought that group continued to battle. Allen, for my money, is probably one of the most undervalued players in all of the NBA. And I've often said that I think Mobley is one of the most overvalued. And it's not because I don't think Mobley's good. I mean, I think he's good, but like for this team, I think Allen might be better. So yeah, when we lost him, that was huge. And again, it was a great regular season game. I think it's good when Cleveland and Detroit are both good because I think there's always been a little bit of, going back to the Mark Price days when Mahorn stuck his elbow in Price's ear and knocked him out. It's good for the NBA when those 2 teams are both good because I think it sets up for a great playoff series, and I think that's what you're going to see in May.
All right, Coach. So getting back into stealing a bucket for our team, we've got this spin pivot backdoor concept. How much have you incorporated these spin pivot backdoor into your playbooks through the years?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, 3 or 4 of our run-its are going to be spin pivots. We call them waffle and donut pivots. And what we do is we try to get the action moving to the right, maybe take a false dribble, or we call it maybe not masked dribble in that direction, land on 2 feet, pivot away from the defense, backdoor cut when the ball sees you. That's the rule, right? And it's extremely effective. It takes timing and practice. But once you're good at it, you're good at it. And I've had some teams that were really, really good at it. And when you are, it's a weapon. And it's something else that not only picks up those points, but like you were talking about in the last segment, it also backs defenses off that want to be overly aggressive because it's been put in their mind that you'll do it. It's a very powerful thing. I love it. I mean, it's one of my favorite things to coach.
Yeah, so with this kind of spin pivot backdoor, you catch this defender in kind of a deer in headlights type of situation where they're starting to relax because they think the action is flowing away from them. All of a sudden, you make that quick spin, and they're like, oh, shoot. And, they're jumping into the passing lane as a pretty natural reaction there. And it's just kind of the perfect setup to spin around, throw a ball fake, plant that outside foot, and hit the back door. And what I talk about a lot in a lot of different content that I post is the opportunity for stagger screens and like gate elevator type of screens to occupy the help defense.
Yep.
So you can really only run this kind of action if you can really isolate that one player on a side of the court. And to do that, a stagger screen or a gate screen is a great way to keep the defense occupied. So dribbling at a stagger, dribbling at a gate screen, and then running the spin backdoor. This can really be a money play. A lot of coaches will use it as an ATO. They'll use it coming out of a timeout or at the start of a quarter. Some coaches can really organize into it on the fly, but there's a lot of good coaches in this area I know that have this in their back pocket and have stolen a ton of points for their team with this kind of idea here using this spin pivot. Any additional thoughts on this spin backdoor, Coach?
Yeah, when I think of our run, it's other than the blind pig that we looked at that Bill Self is so good at coaching. This was the main way that we did it. And you hit you hit the nail on the head. It was always with some masking action that you're dribbling at to set it up and clear out the side. If you've got a good shooter running off of a double screen, a stagger screen, whatever action you want to go over there, and that defense starts to flow in that direction, it will empty the paint out. And like you said before, I think I like the way you said that the defense is going to kind of naturally jump into that when the ball turns back. And we always taught our guys who were going to make the backdoor cut, make a big production out of it. Get your outside hand up, call for the ball as the guy's dribbling away from you so that the defender thinks, right? And as soon as the ball sees you, put that high foot in the ground and cut backdoor. And we tell the guy that makes the pivot, if you can see, you can see his head, shoulders past, roll it. If you have to roll it to the basket, roll it there. It doesn't even have to be a good pass. Just get it out in front of him and keep it on the floor, and you're going to get 2 points out of that. One of my favorite things to coach right there. That right there gets my blood pumping, because that's a great way to steal buckets right there.
Yeah, this is a fun one, and this is definitely one where you feel like it's a cheap bucket. You feel like it's a stolen bucket, because when you hit the timing right, there's really nothing left to do than to make the layup if you've done it well. Coach, I've got a couple concepts left to talk about. We're at about an hour here. I'd like to do a little bit more. But the next thing that I'd like to talk about is a baseline out of bounds play that I've used all throughout my coaching career. I've called this BW because I stole it from Coach Chad Pato, who went to college at Baldwin-Wallace University. So I believe that's where all of this has kind of come together, with the BW verbiage. And I know both of us have coached with Coach Pato. I was an assistant under Coach Pato at East Canton for 2 years. And I think you spent some time with him here as well. But this is the BW play. And I would probably say through my coaching career, my teams have scored so many points on this I couldn't even keep track of. This is a whole YouTube video of us scoring on this. But basically, we've got this kind of formation down low where we put 2 players on the blocks and one a little bit raised up from that. And then all we're going to do is kind of screen away and screen down and rotate our player to throw a lob. So we're intentionally trying to catch the ball in the air and finish it in the air. I've had certain players that are a lot better than others at being the finisher in this action. So you kind of want to pick your personnel correctly here. But there's kind of a science to the screening, where you want to kind of understand where your man is, and you want to kind of push your man into the players who's receiving the lob. And once the players master that, this becomes pretty easy. So I would say you don't want to do this when you don't need it. That we would definitely save this for situations where we felt like we needed a bucket, because when you put something like this on film, it becomes something that's pointed out in a scouting report to take away. So what we would see if we watch this video all the way through, I don't know that we will, but we definitely ran some counters out of this where we would slip to the backside. I guess we're going to see it right now, where we would run a slip option, but we would also run another set play or 2 out of just this formation. So it wasn't a dead giveaway every single time we went to this formation that we were going to run the lob or this slip counter. Any thoughts on Coach Pato's BW play here?
Yeah, first of all, I often wondered what Coach Pato's contribution to the game was all these years, and at least now I know. I spent a year with Coach Pato, and I try to forget most of it. This is really good stuff. I'm just shooting that out there in case he's happens to see some of this. Chad's a great coach.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun together and a lot of laughs. It was not the best team, but it was a really nice group of kids, and Chad did a really good job with them. And I do remember this play, and we got some mileage out of it. Obviously, it's like any other set. When the kid catching the pass doesn't make the shot, it doesn't look nearly as good. But that was a really one of the really good things that Chad had in his playbook. And he's an underrated guy. He did some really nice things too. Again, at where we were at the time, we weren't great, but he did a great job of coaching them, and he was really good at these special situations. I thought, all joking around with Chad, I think he did a great job with that. And obviously he played for Randy Montgomery at Triway, and so his Triway upbringing, you see a lot of that in his coaching, and I think that was a Triway thing. The way I remember the fact that we were so small and couldn't guard their big guys, I'm pretty sure that Coach Snoddy and Coach Montgomery ran that at our smaller teams quite a bit.
Yeah, I enjoyed coaching with Coach Pato. I learned a lot from Coach Pato, and his special situations is a lot of what I did in my coaching career, where I kept a lot of his principles and some of his plays. I know the play Duke that I run as a full court end line out of bounds is something that I got directly from Coach Pato. So big influence, and it's kind of funny to find somebody that we've crossed paths with so closely. We know a lot. Me and you know a lot of the same people,
Sure.
but not necessarily having directly coached with the same people. So that's kind of interesting there. I've got a couple more here. You're not running out of time, are you, Coach?
All right, listen. Where do I got to be, man? It's Saturday. There's a Duke plays Virginia at noon, and I'd like to watch some of that. But other than that, I'm on God's good grace here.
Who you picking in that one?
That Virginia team's hard to figure out. I mean, obviously Duke is really good right now. I think John Shire is a fantastic coach, and I got a chance to meet Coach Shire. He was the main recruiter on my kid when I was in Georgia when Duke recruited Alex O'Connell to go to Duke. Shire was still an assistant under Coach Krzyzewski, and he was the guy that I got to know the most. He was in constant contact with me, so I really root for him. That's hard for me because kind of growing up, I rooted for North Carolina. So that was a major conflict of interest when Alex was at Duke. And, it still is because I'm a big Coach Shire fan. I think he's done such a great job with that team defensively. They're really good. I mean, like you think a lot of times, you think of Duke scoring a lot of points, but man, I think defensively they're outstanding. But I think that Virginia team's pretty talented. They're just kind of hard to figure out. I think that could be a better game than maybe what people think. I don't think that's a gift wrapped win for Duke. So I think it'll be a fun game to watch.
I'm interested to watch that one too. That coach that's at Virginia, Odom, who came from VCU. I like to see these kind of young and up and coming coaches that have proved themselves at the lower levels get an opportunity with a big budget and with some resources and see what they can do. And he seems like one of those guys, like Nico Medved and Bucky McMillan and some of these other coaches that are finally getting the call into what would be the big leagues for college. And they're able to make some noise and make an imprint right away with their coaching philosophy.
Absolutely.
The next one that I wanted to look at here is this Iverson curl action, Coach.
Yeah.
And I think that you've probably used some of this.
I have.
But basically what we're doing here is we're making an elbow entry, and then we're curling a player to the rim. So this is one where the fans in the stands are all going to recognize this as great coaching. They're going to stand and applaud when you get this naked layup off of this action, and it fits so perfectly into any kind of Iverson cut set play series that you have, where you might have 5 plays that all start with these kind of Iverson cuts that allow you to get a clean entry where you want it to be. And this can be a nice option out of it, where all you do is you throw it away from that Iverson cut and you curl that cut hard to the rim. What's your experience with this kind of Iverson curl action?
It's a great question, and we didn't rehearse this, but going back to Alex O'Connell, this actually happened for me when he was getting face guarded a lot when I was down in Georgia. Once he became, the great player that he was, and we would run him off this Iverson, pick some, in games just to get him some touches. And there was a time where we ran it and somehow ended up going to the elbow. It wasn't even the play call, and Alex was such a smart player that he saw the pass and did it on his own, right? And ended up catching and dunking it, and so it went into our playbook. We ran him off that Iverson cut in our Viking series. That I've also got at your store. We ran that Viking series for him a lot because it got him into some small to big screening, and it included everybody and kind of, again, we call it the equal opportunity to beating a box and one or a face guarding offense. But yeah, it's great stuff. And it's another simple call. So like I said, we kind of stumbled into it. I did, at least, because my players are smarter than me, but it's a tough thing to guard. Excuse me.
All right, Coach, I've never personally ran this Iverson curl. I do have a lot of coaching friends that use it, but I do think it is one of the more gratifying things to watch take place, where when you see that happen, I'm like, okay, this guy coaches. This is a great timing here.
The first time we did it, it wasn't great coaching. It was a smarter player. But after that, we put it in the playbook. That's the other thing. Sometimes you can learn a lot just from keeping your mouth closed and watching. And that was one of those situations, but it's good stuff. Yeah.
Hey, last clip that I want to look at here is a designed lob play. This one's from Coach Calipari. And, this set in particular, I think is pretty interesting just because of how fast they're able to get into the lob, where you've got a dribble push entry. It looks like they're kind of faking a ghost screen there at the top of the key. And then they're flowing that right into a kind of a sneaky back screen to throw that ball up there. Lobs are definitely, you can steal your team a bucket against lobs. Lobs usually are a little more prevalent against zone defense than they are man-to-man. Against man-to-man, you're really depending. You really need the defense to play a screen a certain way. So there are teams that hug up and don't bump as much on back screens. But against zone, you can kind of create a lob pocket to roll somebody into with screening action. Against man-to-man, you're a little more dependent on how the defense plays the screen. So I've used a ton of lobs against zone defense, against man-to-man pretty sparingly, in all honesty. But I think this is a great way to try to steal your team a bucket. I think the only risk here with the lob is that it can the pass is really important. You need to have somebody that's practiced this pass. Sometimes the pass can be a little bit more contested than other times. Against zones, you can kind of find passing lanes that are a little less obstructed. There's usually not as much ball pressure, but he's having to throw that pass right in this clip that we're watching with a lot of ball pressure, and he does put it right on the money. And this is great execution, but I do think the pass tends to be really important with these lobs. But you also get the added bonus of the momentum. If you're a high school coach that has a dunker, it is an exciting thing for your team and for the fans for them to dunk, and it can be something that can kind of swing momentum of games if you can execute it. I do see a lot of coaches kind of chasing, trying to get their kids a dunk, and they're living with, I think, far too many turnovers from trying to run an action like this at the high school level. Any thoughts on lob plays here as a tactic to steal your team a bucket, Coach?
Yeah, first of all, I would be willing to bet that that's a counter action, that he set that up. In our Viking package that we were just talking about, when it was a face guard man-to-man, the backdoor run it, the Viking run it was a very similar action to that. It wasn't as much dribbling. It was more passing into with the masking action. And what would happen is, instead of the guy there at the bottom coming off of a double screen to catch and shoot, right, we would send our shooter up toward a double screen and back screen the outside guy, the double screen, and throw that backdoor lob for a dunk. And we got this quite a bit. In Georgia, I had dunkers, right? I mean, Alex would go dunk that. When I was at Canton South, I had a kid named Gerald Robinson who played football at Michigan, was one of the best athletes in the state. And we ran that for him, and we got lob dunk there. And I had a kid here at Wilmington named Brady Vilvins, who was a Division III national champion high jumper, who we ran a similar play for like that, and he got lob dunk off of that. That's another way that we do our run-its. So like our run-its, we talked about backdoors. With certain plays, our run-it was a backdoor lob. And again, it's another great way to steal a bucket. If you've got a guy who can dunk it, it's a dunk. If you don't have a guy that can dunk it, it's still 2 points. That's what I always tell coaches. Well, you know what, coach, we don't have a dunk. That's fine. Run the play, run him back there. And if it opens up, throw it up there and let him catch it and either bang it off the glass or come down with it and go up off a 2 and score. There are opportunities to get baskets there, even if you don't have a dunker. So I'm a big fan. And again, like I said before, I would be willing to bet anything that that's a counterplay to something that they had already run in that game.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point there. Even if you don't have guys that can dunk the basketball, lobs are still a great way to try to steal a bucket. If the dunk can obviously energize the crowd, energize the team, it's a little bit more fun, but there's still a lot of substance in just catching it and laying it in. And the conversion rate, I don't think, drops all that much from a dunk. No. You'll see guys, slam it off the back of the rim trying to dunk the ball every once in a while. But for the most part, if the lob's good and you've got a competent person on the back end of that, the conversion rate's going to be pretty high, catching it and laying it in. Maybe not quite as high as it dunking the ball, but pretty close. Coach, this has been a really fun conversation. I have one more question for you to kind of wrap things up today, and then I'd like to get out of here. But, we've talked a lot about trying to steal points for our team. How much do you think trying to steal a bucket for your team is about scouting and understanding the tendencies of the team that you're going against versus universal deception principles that you would be operating on. Talk to me a little bit about, is it the team you're playing against and how they play, or is it kind of understanding how the schemes that you're using work against general principles?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's both. I think certain teams are more susceptible to getting beat on these backdoors, and that doesn't mean they're poorly coached. It means just the way they play defense, right? The way they play, and I think that they're going to be maybe more opportunities against certain teams. So it's definitely scouting, but I think I like the word you used there, universal. I think there's some universal ideas that when you put them in your package and your kids are well drilled in them, that you can create those opportunities within the flow of a game yourself, even against teams that don't set themselves up to be susceptible. So I think the scouting report would dictate volume, right? I think that how well you coach your team is going to dictate effectiveness. And then again, and I want to say this. You make a tournament. Tournament run's a great thing to look at because it also has some value in the regular season. But like every tournament game is going to take on a little bit different. When you make a run, it's going to take on a little different personality. If you're a running team, you want to get the score up. But like when we made our run to the Final Four in Georgia, our Sweet 16 game was 54-52. That's a pretty low scoring game, right?
Uh-huh.
When we played in our Elite Eight game, the final score was 92-87. Right. And it wasn't because we did anything different. It was just the scouting report, dictated some things. The other team tried to slow us down in the one game, and in the other game, the team engaged us. So there were more opportunities in the 92-87 game, right, with the scouting report to hit that team with some of these concepts. It doesn't mean that those concepts weren't very effective and important in the 54-52 game. So there's that kind of balance. What it really comes down to, and to kind of boil it down, whether it doesn't matter who you're playing, coach it well, teach it well, time it up, work on the fundamentals, right? And it will have some value for you in a close game, period.
Yeah, I think in scouting, you'll get some identifications that really help you make decisions. For example, with these backdoor plays, when you have a team that is a pressure denial team, you've already got them where you want them. You've just got to execute the backdoor element of it. When you've got a gap team, you may be wanting to use more misdirection or more reversal type of backdoors where you draw them into the passing lanes and then run your backdoor action.
Definitely.
Hey, Coach, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for coming on today, and I look forward to kind of breaking down the next topic with you here. What do you say about a week from now we get back together?
I think we should do it every week, man. I love it every time. It makes me feel like I'm still doing something important. And, I would say to all the coaches out there who are still in the tournament, make your dreams, man. This is the time of year. This is the time of year I really miss it the most, because you got a chance to do that thing that your community will never, ever forget. And so cherish every moment that you've got left with your players. And I wish everybody that looks at Coach Hack's stuff and my stuff the best as their seasons come to hopefully an exciting close.
Yeah, I honestly feel like we would never run out of topics to talk about. We could do one every week and it would probably never feel stale. We've already done how many of these, Coach? We've done 25 or 30 of these probably. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like any topics are getting stale just yet. So, hey, audience out there, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in at least a week or so to connect up on another topic. Coach, thanks again for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Matt. As always, it's a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time.
All right. See you, brother.